Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome to the Monday edition of Catholic Answers Live. Happy to have you here with us. Thanks for being here with us. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our number, 888-31-TRUTH. And this hour we tackle, what if the Catholic Church is right about sex? What would the world be like if people would accept that? What if people came to understand we were meant for chastity and fidelity and self-giving and all of those good qualities? Ask yourself this, what about the institutions of our society? Are they, by rejecting this, the Christian sexual ethic proposed by the Church, are they actually destroying lives? Actually, that's just what our guest argues in a brand new book called The Sexual State, how elite ideologies are destroying lives and why the Catholic Church was right all along. Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse is the author. Dr. Morse, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's a blast to be back on.
It's very good to have you. I think I hate to bring up bad memories, but I think the last time you were guilty of some kind of hate crime or something. Last time we spoke, do you remember the thing? It was.
Oh, I'm still on the hate list. Si.
Are you still on the hate list?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My question is, why aren't you on the hate list? You guys need to up your game.
I know. I feel like we're failing because
I know
what we're referring to is the Southern Poverty Law Center scam. Oh, excuse me. The Southern Poverty. Did the word scam come out of my mouth?
I think that was you.
Has put Dr. Morse and her institute, the Ruth Institute, on that campaign because, on their kind of bad, naughty list. And that has to do with you standing up for traditional marriage. You were one of the spokespeople for the Proposition 8, which was a successful ballot initiative here in California to maintain the definition of marriage as being a union between a man and a woman. But all that is in the past now. Now you just have to bake the cake or whatever. Well, actually, maybe you don't have to bake the cake. We find out. But but you're still on that list. You're still on the bad list, huh?
That's it. No one knows how you get on the list or how you get off the list. Yeah. So I just kind of wear it as a badge of honor. And, sometimes people say, gee, you're not nearly mean enough to be on this list. And
I know it's because you can harken back to a day when the Southern Poverty Law Center was challenging the Ku Klux Klan in court and doing all that. And right. I think they're living off the fumes of that once noble effort.
I think that's right. So I'm on the anti-LGBT portion of the list because I don't go along with all of the assumptions of the radicals. So.
Yeah. Well, okay, so because the sexual revolution is a contested revolution, and I think that a lot of people in society would like to say, a lot of institutions in our society would like to say, this is not a contested revolution. If you're on one side of it, you're on the right side, and if you're on the other side, you're on the, creepy, old, dying, last gasp of the wrong side. And that's what this book is about, and to a large extent, the sexual state. The thing is, though, what struck me about the book is more and more, I do think people are there are authors out there coming to tell the truth about the sexual revolution. And you've been doing it yourself for a long time. You were the first person I remember publicly using the phrase victims of the sexual revolution, which I think is a really important phrase. But in this book, you argue that the sexual revolution is rooted in dishonesty about the human person. And for that reason, it needs the state to kind of propagate it.
That's exactly right. In a sense, that insight that comes pretty early in the book is the key to the whole thing. And I think it's the key to understanding the whole course of the sexual revolution side, because I've been giving these talks in front of live audiences for, several years now. And you can look out in the audience and you can see people nodding their head, or you can see them scratching their head or whatever, And I'm pretty sure people get this point, right? Yeah. That if you're trying to build a society around things that are untrue, you won't be able to succeed. It's impossible, right? But if you're trying to do the impossible, that doesn't necessarily talk them out of trying. They continue to try, but they just need more power to make it work, and they need a lot of propaganda to make it seem plausible. So in the book, I lay out what I think are the key ideas of the sexual revolution, point out that they're all false, impossible, can't be done.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, Si, a lot of times, I mean, I used to feel this way. And it was really when we lost the court cases on the marriage issue that I finally started asking myself, well, how can it be that we keep pointing out that this is irrational and that it can't work and that it has all these problems? Why isn't that good enough to win? You know, why
Yeah.
are we still arguing about this? And it turns out that doesn't really dissuade the true believer. See, the true believer is committed to the fantasy ideology,
Yeah.
just like the communist is committed to the idea of a prosperous society with no property, you know, where everybody owns everything in common and it's all wonderful.
Right.
And if we just keep trying a little harder, it'll all be fine, you know. And of course, you end up with Venezuela. You know, you don't end up with more prosperity or more equality. You just end up with a mess.
Right.
And I think something comparable is happening with the sexual revolution. People think it's a high moral duty to implement these principles, but it can't be done. And so since it can't be done, they just need more and more power and more kind of crazy propaganda.
Yeah.
And you still keep moving further and further away from anything like human flourishing or happiness.
It strikes me that another insight here in the book, and that I've heard you speak about as well, and tell me if I get this wrong, but that in order to continue this idealizing of the sexual revolution, this idea that, oh, it's a glorious thing and it's a good thing, and you really have to suppress any knowledge of the victims. You just have to
Yes.
not tell those stories.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. When you start to see that, then you see that maybe that's a key to overcoming it somehow. So in the first part of the book, I spend actually the first chapter just talking about different people who have been harmed in some way by the sexual revolution, whether it's children of divorce, whether it's abandoned spouses, whether it's people who were harmed by their abortions or their contraceptive use. There are whole lots of different people who've been harmed, but you never see them in public, right? You never see their stories. You know,
No.
it's always just this glorious march towards more freedom and more fun and more liberation, and you know, and so it's very important that you not talk about women who regret their abortions. Right. And I
Right.
think when the pro-life movement started thinking about those women, it changed a lot of the discussion. It shifted the discussion around, didn't it? You know, when
Yes.
those ladies start showing up with those signs saying, I regret my abortion. This is a woman 60 years old. I mean, I remember the San Diego Walk for Life. I still have a photo of that the older lady. She comes every year, I guess, you know. And she was in her 60s. She's just sitting there with that sign saying, I regret my abortion. It's heartbreaking.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. But you won't see her with her own comedy show on Netflix or something, you know.
Yes.
You will only see the cheerleaders.
Right. Literally
And
a
so the whole,
cheerleader on Netflix. I think you're talking about that comedian Michelle something whose name I forget. But
yes,
dressing
yes,
up as a
that's right.
drum majorette cheerleader for abortion.
I know. But that's all the mainstream media can allow, right?
Right.
Once you decide you're going down that path, um, you've got to suppress the voices of the victims. You can't say, well, gee, maybe abortion was a mistake, or you know,
Right.
gee, maybe sex actually does make babies, and we should kind of plan on that rather than suppressing that. You know, maybe
Yes.
it would be a good society if you planned around that fact. Nope, can't have that. That's too easy.
888-318-7884 is our number. 888-318-7884. Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse has for many years been one of the premier voices for sanity in regard to confronting the sexual revolution. She has a brand new book, The Sexual State: How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Catholic Church Was Right All Along. And you say there are three parts to the sexual this I had not seen before, or I had not heard you say it. But so could you just review for me before we have to take a break, and then we'll come back and take some calls? The three kind of, are they stages or ideologies, core thoughts that go with the
Yes.
sexual
I
revolution?
think of them as three interlocking ideologies
Okay.
because they mutually support each other, but they are different. I mean, each one could run on its own a little bit, but I start with the contraceptive ideology, And that's the idea that a good and decent society should do everything possible to separate sex from babies. Right? Do you
Yes.
recognize that as our world, right?
Yeah.
A good society should separate sex from babies. That's the contraceptive ideology. Uh, Second point, a good society should separate sex and babies from marriage. So there's no special requirement that you be married
Right.
before you have either sex or have a baby. And I call that the divorce ideology,
Mhm.
because that's really saying that kids don't actually need their parents. The kids are so resilient, they'll be fine. Don't worry about it, right? And then the final ideology is what I call the gender ideology, and that is the idea that the human body is somehow insignificant. And so in its early form, it was men and women are completely interchangeable. Men and women are identical, except women are better. See, that was the old form of feminism, right?
Yes.
And now it's to the point where men and women, well, maybe they're different, but your body is not so important that you can't reconstruct your body so that you can become whatever gender you want to be. That's how the gender ideology has morphed. But it is a variant of the original idea, which is that your body is not particularly significant, right? And so that's what I call the gender ideology, and the push towards redefining marriage, a genderless version of marriage, the promotion of homosexual activity and homosexual marriage as a thing, those are outgrowths of the gender ideology that are claiming that the body's not very significant.
888-318-7884, our number. Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse, our guest, and we're talking about the sexual state, how the state gets involved in all of these sexual revolution issues because they will not stand on their own. It's striking to think about how the gay marriage agenda was on ballots in different places, and it wasn't doing all that well as far as in some places the legislatures were going over to it. In some places populations were voting for it. But for example, in California, where you would think such a thing would be a slam dunk, at least that's what they would tell you, is that it should be a slam dunk here. It was rejected. And it was, in fact, the raw power of judges that made this thing happen. It was a raw exercise of power. This was not a democratic undertaking.
No. And it also wasn't something that just kind of emerged from the grassroots in some kind of organic cultural manner that has no particular origin, no particular cause. It's just kind of a force of nature, like the hurricane blowing in from the Gulf. It just happened. Nobody's responsible for it. That's not true. And I think you can plainly see that with the whole issue around the normalization of same-sex sexual practice, the redefinition of marriage, all of those things. That didn't come from the grassroots. That has been created, very carefully created by people with a lot of money and a lot of power.
All lines are filling up, and I have to run for a quick sec. We'll be right back to take your calls for Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse. Before we go, remember that Made This Way, the brand new book from Layla Miller and Trent Horn, is coming out. You can pre-order now by going to shop.catholic.com. This is a book that takes a parental approach and helps you talk about the hardest moral issues of our day, many having to do with the sexual revolution, with children and teens. And not just, here's some advice for you, but actually helps you get into those conversations that need to be had within families. It's called Made This Way, and you can pre-order it now at shop.catholic.com.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
Our mission is to transform the world one woman at a time through a spiritual program of formation that helps them to see who they are as daughters of the Most High God and to enjoy the gift that God has given to them by virtue of their femininity.
Women of Grace with Jeanette Bankovic-Williams. Tomorrow morning, 11 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. We're discussing The Sexual State, brand new book from Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse, how elite ideologies are destroying lives and why the church was right all along. I like any subtitle that ends with "the church was right all along." I appreciate that. We have a bunch of callers on, however. Dr. Morse, shall we take a few calls?
I'm happy to do that.
All right. John in Bloomington, Illinois, listening on AM 1060. You are on with Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse. John, your question?
Good evening, ma'am. I have a question regarding the Catholics' position on modesty. I believe that this is an issue because it's very clear that impurity is flooding our streets. You can't go anywhere. You can't go to a store. You can't open a magazine or a newspaper. You can't watch anything on television without impurity flooding the eyes and being an influence on our teenage daughters. Does the Catholic Church still have the position where they approve a Mary-like standard of fashion for dress?
Well, I think officially the Catholic Church's position on modesty has never changed. You know, the church has always had the position that people should dress modestly and not make themselves into an occasion of sin for others and to themselves. So I think officially there's never been a change in that position. I think, in fact, the church has kind of hasn't done much about it recently. Let's put it that way. You know, the church is the church, let's be honest, the church has been AWOL on a lot of these issues. You know, I mean, not that the doctrine has officially changed, but there just aren't as many people speaking about it the way they should be and could be. And I think that's been a big loss to the culture because it means that the forces that you're talking about, John, kind of have a free rein. You know, they just kind of go careening through society, and there's nobody to put on the brakes at all. So that's been a loss.
John, I hope that was helpful for you. We have lots of calls for Dr. Morse, so I am going to keep going. Michael in St. Louis, Missouri, listening on 1460 AM. You are up with Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse. Your question, please.
Great, thanks. One of the things you always hear back when you talk about redefining marriage is people will say, well, it's not hurting anybody, so what's your problem with it? What do you think the best response to that is to show that it is hurting people and how they're hurt?
Well, you know, honestly, people say that about every part of the sexual revolution. You know, it's not really hurting anybody. It's not hurting you. So why should you care what somebody else is doing? So, for example, people kind of said, well, how does my divorce affect your marriage? Children will be fine. It's not that big of a deal. The kids are fine after divorce. They get over it. They move on. And, you know, your marriage is fine and solid. How could my divorce possibly affect you? Well, that's what people said back in the day. And of course, now when we look around us, we can see that it actually does matter quite a bit. You know, that the understanding of human community that says, I'm not hurting you because my divorce is just happening here in my house and it doesn't have any spillover effects. That's a very naive view of how a social order works. I mean, and I'll just give you one example on that particular issue, Michael. I was talking to a friend of mine who's about my age, and she was talking about how when she was a teenager, her parents were professors at a university. I forget what university it was. And they decided to experiment with open marriage. See, back in the 60s and the 70s, her parents decided to do this experiment. And she, you know, my friend and her brothers and sisters are like, what the heck's going on? So her parents are having an open marriage. One of her parents, they get divorced, and one of them marries another friend, you know, another professor. And so that marriage breaks up. And then that spare spouse goes and has an affair with yet another spouse in the same circle of friends. And so what ended up happening is that whole little community, everybody ended up divorced. you know. And so when you say that marriage is structurally going to be an impermanent institution, you kind of turn everybody loose, right? And so it does have spillover effects. And honestly, that's what I do in a lot of the sexual state. A lot of this book, Michael, I spend a lot of the time in here really showing the different ways that my sexual activity does turn out to affect other people, and the structures and the rules that we have around things those structures and rules do affect other people. So that's the general point. And then the gay marriage issue is one instance of that more general point, which is that when you create a society where you say children don't really have a right to their parents, you've said something quite profound, that some children have a legally recognized right to know both of their parents, and other children don't. That's quite a profound thing to say, and it does affect everybody. So that's the way I would go with it, and I would not be afraid, Michael, when you're talking to people about these issues, do not be afraid to bring up the other topics where we have many more years of experience and can say for sure the church is right? It may be a little soon to say, what is gay marriage going to do to all of society? But it's not too soon to say that divorce has been a mess. It's not too soon to say that. We have plenty of evidence on that point.
How does that strike you, Michael?
That's great. Thanks for the information. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Something that, as you go through these three kind of the contraceptive ideology, the divorce ideology, and then the gender ideology, all connected into this one overarching thing we can call the sexual revolution.
Right.
In what way would you say, because you say the state is used as an instrument of power to kind of promote these, because reason won't do it. You can't reason your way to think, hey, a society where most marriages fail, that's the kind of society we want. You're never going to reason your way to that. That makes no sense. So how does government actually encourage or promote the divorce ideology?
Well, divorce is actually the most obvious one to see, because the underlying idea, and it's important to see the underlying idea, the thing people are trying to get to when they create these ideologies. I mean, I think the fantasy that people have is the kids are so resilient that it doesn't matter what we do as adults. We can partner and repartner and pair up and, break up and reconfigure our relationships, and the kids will be fine because they're so resilient. Now, we adults, we're so fragile. We have to have our love lives exactly the way we want them, or we'll go to pieces. But the kids are going to be fine. It's all good. That's the underlying fantasy, right?
Yes.
That is trying to be achieved. And so the way the government has promoted the divorce ideology is really very simple, Cy. What no-fault divorce says, no-fault divorce is actually a misnomer, I would say. What it really should be called is unilateral divorce. Because what no-fault divorce says is that one party can end the marriage for any reason or no reason, and the government will always take sides with the person who wants the marriage the least. See, that's the point people don't get. The government always takes sides with the person who doesn't want to stay married. That's not neutral. That's a big thing. That's a big thumb on the scale of pushing people towards impermanence and towards non-sexual exclusivity. So that's the other thing that no-fault divorce does, Cy, is it's not just that marriage is not permanent anymore. Marriage is also not sexually exclusive. Because adultery used to be like the number one fault, right? That's a marital fault. You're in trouble. You can't do that. Well, now, heck, you can do that. The adulterer gets whatever they want.
Because what used to carry consequences with it now no longer carries consequences before a judge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sadly, I'm going to say this and probably get in a lot of trouble, but I don't care. Sadly, Catholic divorce is not that different from civil divorce. That so many people look at the annulment process as if it is simply Catholic divorce, and they anticipate. Sometimes, I hear these stories all the time. So when you put yourself out there in the public, like I put myself out there, people tell me things, and one of the stories I've heard repeatedly is people dissolving long-standing marriages, 20, 30-year marriages, because one spouse decides that she doesn't want to be married anymore, and she finds a priest who says, oh, honey, you've got grounds for annulment. It'll be fine. And the kids are sitting there going, what? You weren't married all this time? The husband's like, what? What just happened here, you know? And so the church has succumbed to the times in that respect, I would say, you know, because honestly, if okay, you've been together 30 years, you had 7 children, it's not really a marriage. Hey, how about we convalidate this union? Let's make it so it's valid, okay? You're grown up now. Let's do it. Let's take care of it. But nobody ever thinks of that. No, it's divorce, divorce, divorce. You know, annulment, annulment, annulment. Move on to the next spouse. You know, come on, people. We got to do better than that.
And it ends up with children abandoned, is what I mean.
Oh my gosh.
Legally sanctioned abandoning of children.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they don't get over it.
No.
You know, and you were talking about Layla Miller. Layla's a good friend of mine, and her book, Primal Loss, I wrote the forward to it. And that book is about the impact of divorce on children, and they are the #1 victims whose stories never get told.
No, we can't talk about that. We cannot talk about the victims of the sexual revolution. Then we'll have to admit that it's not all good and clear. You got to be careful there, Dr. Morse. We'll be right back with more on the sexual revolution and the brand new book, The Sexual State, from Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children, or how to help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Lila Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to confront tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and unfortunately inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about it on Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Next hour, Mark Bromley is going to be here from Ignatius Press. They have a wonderful book out from Cardinal Francis Arinze about the evangelizing parish. We're going to talk about, what is the state of the parish? We talk about all these great big giant issues in the church, and the church happens for almost everyone at the very local level of the parish. So what's the state of the parish, and how can a parish become a fully evangelizing parish? That will be Mark Bromley next hour. This hour we're talking about, and I'm going to say it slowly so that because it's a mouthful maybe, and I want you to know what the book is and where to get it. The book is called The Sexual State: How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Church Was Right All Along. The author is Jennifer Robach Morse, PhD. And you can get the book by going either to ruthinstitute.org. Ruth Institute is the institute founded by Dr. Morse to defend marriage, or you can go to the website of the book itself, thesexualstate.com. And I believe if you go to and buy it at thesexualstate.com this week, you're getting an autographed copy.
That's right.
That's all
But you
right.
got to buy it from us. Don't mess around with Amazon.
Uh, don't mess with Amazon. The Sexual State is the name of the book. Thesexualstate.com is where you can get it. Tons of people on the phone for you, Dr. Morse. And I have a million questions, but I think it's best if I let them ask questions. So
Okay.
we proceed to Kenneth in Bismarck, North Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Kenneth, you are on with Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse.
Yes, I hope I'm not taking you off track, but it seems like the pill is the thing that opened the door to all this madness. And I'm wondering, is anyone in the church advocating for women who've been killed or crippled from the pill, like a class action lawsuit like we got going against the tobacco industry and asbestos, and now I guess they're going after Roundup.
I see. Yeah. So are there suits against the companies who have produced these contraceptive chemicals and hormones in the way that, yeah, that's a wonderful question. Like the tobacco companies they went after and pesticide companies. Has that happened on the contraceptive end of it at all?
Okay, so first off, Kenneth, this is a great question for a number of reasons, and no, you're not taking us off track one bit, because the contraceptive issue is really the heart of a lot of the problems that we have, because the contraceptive ideology is basically trying to say sex is an entitlement. Sex without a live baby, it's an entitlement. You can have as much sex as you want. Nothing bad's going to happen as long as you use a condom every time. You know, I mean, this type of mentality. And so that's at the root of a lot of the problems that we're having. So it's, I think, very important that we talk about it. And I'm sorry to say no one but the Catholic Church will talk about it. And we don't even have enough Catholics talking about it as far as I'm concerned. To your specific question, I don't know of anybody who's planning a class action lawsuit on this topic. I posed it to a couple of attorneys one time, and they started talking to me about the burden of proof and things like that to really prove the connection between this and that and the third thing. And you know, okay, so they know their business. But what I have to tell you, Kenneth, is that in cases where women have been harmed by their contraception, there are a number of cases, and I talk about them in the book. In fact, there's a whole section in this book on the contraceptive ideology, including a whole chapter on propaganda. And one of the things that they do is, you know, of course, the harms of contraception are airbrushed out of the picture, right? You never hear about that. But if you keep your ear to the ground, you will hear about these women who died at the age of 22 from a stroke or from, you know, a blood clot or, you know, those type of things. And their parents, there have been a number of cases where the parents go and try to sue the pharmaceutical companies, and what tends to happen is that the companies will pay off some little settlement, and the settlement will have a gag order attached to it. Okay, and so there was one case that I talk about in the book, and that I've talked about in numerous of my lectures on this topic. Erica Langhart was the young lady's name. She died. I think she was 22, something like that. She died, and her parents sued, and her parents said, you know what, we're not taking this settlement. This is like pocket change to these pharmaceutical companies. They just consider this the cost of doing business. Our daughter doesn't matter to them. Preventing further harm to other women, that doesn't matter to them. I'm not taking your money, and we're not going to be silent. Well, eventually, that mother ended up committing suicide. So it's really a tragic story all the way around. And I feel like a lot of the pro-life people need to be moving into this direction to reach out to these women and their families to offer solace and help. And if there are any trial attorneys listening to me here, I realize it's a long shot and there's a lot of work that a lot of legwork would have to go into doing one of these lawsuits. But you know, if we can essentially ban smoking, we ought to be able to do something about these risks because they're real and they're well documented.
Kenneth, thank you so much for that call. You didn't take us off track at all.
No, not a bit. In fact, while you're getting the next caller on here, I'm gonna flip open the book here. Yes. It's chapter 6 is called "The Propaganda for the Contraceptive Ideology." And are you still there, honey? I can't see you guys anymore.
Oh, we're still here.
Okay, great.
And you're still with us.
Yes, yes. Propaganda for the contraceptive ideology. I think that's probably the longest chapter in the book, and part of the propaganda is to suppress genuine, authentic medical information about the harms that are associated both with contraception and with abortion. And the professions go into overdrive to like circle the wagons around the idea that this is all totally safe and no risks, no harms, and all of that. So I think that that's one of the parts of this book that I'm really the most proud of, and I hope pro-life people will take full advantage of that.
Thanks again, Kenneth, for that call. Steve in Houston, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. You are up with Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse. Your question, Steve.
Hi, my question is, we've had the gay marriage ruling from the Supreme Court, and now we've had the transgender trend moved through society. What do you see as the next thing that's going to kind of turn our world upside down and kind of shock us? What's the next thing that's coming down the pike?
Well, each one of these three ideologies has its own end game. Okay, Steve? So the gender ideology, their end game, what they want is the complete elimination of anything to do with gender from law and from public policy and from social, just society, right? So removing mother and father out of the law, removing husband and wife, those words were removed from legal codes across the country in the aftermath of creating genderless marriage, because that's what had to happen next, So then they were poised for the whole transgender thing, but they're not going to be satisfied as long as there's anything in law or social practice that says men and women are different, or there's something special about a man or something special about a woman. So that's what those guys are up to. That's what the gender ideology is about. The divorce ideology, the end game for those people, and I hope y'all are sitting down and don't drive off the road, but the end game for those people is they want contract parenting. They want to eliminate the connection between biology and legally recognized parenthood. And they're already talking about that in the law journals. Okay, so 2 or 3 or 4 adults could get together and say, we want to have a baby together, and we're going to create a contract ahead of time, and we're going to parcel out the legal rights. We'll use your sperm and your egg, and we'll gestate it over here in the surrogate mother. And these people over here are going to be the intended parents, and so on and so forth. They want it all done by contract, and to have the body be completely irrelevant. So that's where those guys are headed. That's where the divorce ideology is headed. And the contraceptive ideology, guys, you might not want to believe this, but I think the end game for those people, population control. They love, love, love China. They won't admit it, but they love the state having so much power that you have to have a permit to have a baby, okay? I don't care whether the Chinese allow people to have 1 baby or 2 or 1.5. I really don't care. It's the principle of the thing that the government should be issuing birth permits to ordinary people to have children. That's the end game of the contraceptive ideology. Fun and freedom have nothing to do with it. This is all about power, and you got to see that. That's the main thing you have to see about the sexual revolution. It's never really been about fun and freedom.
Wow, Steve, you opened that up for us. Any thoughts, Steve?
It's very interesting. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Poor guy, probably shocked him.
Where I thought you might go with the contraceptive mentality is that there is a kind of anti-humanism out there now that's growing, a sense of, well, people aren't that good anyways. Nature's better off without us, and that maybe
that's been there for a while. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Those people are out there, because there are the people. First, there was the ZPG people, zero population growth people, and then there's all, we really need to reduce the population. And yeah, there is an anti-human element to the whole thing, no question about it.
We live in interesting times. But by the way, if you want to talk with Dr. Morse, we still got time to get you on the line. 888-318-7884 is our number here. If you'd like to be a parish partner for Catholic Answers, we've got materials like bumper stickers, window clings, bulletin inserts, info cards, all kinds of materials that you can give out at your parish with the permission of your pastor, working together with your pastor there to let people know about Catholic Answers Live, especially in those places maybe where, well, I don't know if especially is the word, but where we're no longer on the air. We'd love people to know we're still producing this program, sending it out on 360 different stations and on Sirius Satellite and through the internet and all that. Just email us at calpartners@catholic.com. That's CAL partners@catholic.com and become a parish partner today.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Here's one thing that I would recommend, what I call gap time. So, for example, you're driving in the car. When you're at home, maybe doing dishes, what are you listening to on the plane? See, I use all those gap opportunities and fill those gaps with things that are going to strengthen and deepen my faith. So I listen to EWTN podcasts all the time because I also want to learn and grow and deepen in my faith.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse is our guest. She is the founder and director of the Ruth Institute, which you should find out about, ruthinstitute.org, doing the Lord's work in assisting those who are victims of the sexual revolution. First of all, not forgetting the victims of the sexual revolution, and also promoting a healthy conception of the human person, especially in sexual matters having to do with marriage. Her brand new book is The Sexual State: How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Catholic Church Was Right All Along. You can get that at thesexualstate.com. We go now to Ben in Lubbock, Texas, listening on Our Lady of Victory Radio. Ben, your question for Dr. Morse.
Thank you. I guess my question is that why are we talking about this in this moment in time when the horrors that clergy are committing, just horrific things, and how are we to justify our position as far as sexual morality is concerned when the darkness that is, I mean, just even today, the things that have been revealed as far as cover-ups and things like that. I mean, when our Protestant brothers and sisters say, hey, who are y'all to be talking about these things? With what authority do you still preach these things? What is going to be our response to that? And why aren't we talking about the causes of the scandals that are happening inside our church?
All right, Ben, let's let Dr. Morse take a stab at that.
Well, Ben, I'm glad you brought this up because I do talk about it all the time. In fact, if you look at the Ruth Institute Facebook page right now, we have up there a little petition that basically says to one of the victims, this poor kid, he was 11 years old when McCarrick started working on him. And McCarrick abused him for 20 years. And the tragedy of that guy, I mean, there are multiple tragedies, obviously, but one of the tragedies is that nobody believed him. Nobody believed him. He tried to tell his parents and no one would listen to him. So one of the things that we can do as ordinary people, no matter what the clergy do or don't do, no matter what the bishops choose to do or not, doggone it, we need to be listening to the victims, and we need to be listening to whistleblowers. If your church secretary says, there's some kind of hanky-panky going on over here and I don't like it, but I'm afraid to say anything because I'm afraid I'll lose my job or whatever, we need to be stepping into the breach and supporting those people who are either victims or whistleblowers. That has been a huge cultural failure in our community, and I think people are ready to deal with it. I just think, honestly, Ben, I know it's sickening, it's awful, but I think this is our moment. Because this is when we are going to say that these things are wrong. They're wrong if Catholic priests do it. They're wrong if Harvey Weinstein does it. They're wrong if girls' gymnastics doctors do it, right? You remember that awful story, that Dr. Nasser who is assaulting the little girls while they're on the examining table? I mean, it's just awful, awful stuff. But we're the only ones who will even dare to say it's wrong all the way down. It's not just that they didn't consent. Even if they consent, it's wrong. It's wrong, you know? And these guys going around acting like they're entitled, that's the thing that's got to go. Nobody's entitled. We got to stop all that stuff. So, you know, it's awful and it's shameful and it's embarrassing. But at the same time, Ben, my honest to goodness opinion is the Mother of God is cleaning house. She is cleaning house, and she's lifting up these rocks, and all these creepy crawly things are coming out. And it's like, okay, we're going to deal with them. We're going to deal with them. And anybody who says we're not going to deal with it because of whatever thing they make up about why we're not going to deal with it, I'm against that person. Left, right, center, I don't care. I'm not going to listen to that. We need to deal with it. And that means dealing with the abuse itself and dealing with the underlying sexual culture that has made all of this possible, that gives people the sense that they can do whatever they feel like. That's what's got to go. So you know, please take heart and tell your Protestant friends, you know, yes, we're wrong. We're wrong in what we're doing, but we're correct in what we're teaching, and we need to teach it more and live it more. And we need y'all's help. We need y'all's help because, you know, I'm sure a lot of your Protestant friends know the Catholic Church goes down. They're going down with it. You know, is some little evangelical church going to be able to stand up to the gay lobby or something? You know, that's not going to happen. So it's very important that we get it right. And I think this is our moment. And I really want people to take heart. Go sign our little petition for poor little James and tell him, James, we believe you. We believe what happened to you. And we're sorry that it happened. It shouldn't have happened. You know, that's what we need to be saying.
Ben, thank you very, very much. It is an important, and I have to say, I agree with you that this idea that we're going to not look at these things has to just stop. There's no more looking away. It's we've got to look under all those rocks and get it out. Lydia in West Virginia, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Thanks for downloading the app on your phone, Lydia. Your question for Dr. Morse.
Hi, I just had a discussion with my niece this past summer about gay unions, and I wasn't quite sure how to argue this with her, but she said she thinks the government or the state should allow gay persons to have a legal same-sex union but not allow them to call it marriage. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the other thing, just tonight, my 16-year-old son, he's asking, should the government be involved in prohibiting gay unions? Why should the government say it is right or wrong? Is it the government's place to say anything about it at all?
Well, first of all, to your niece's comment, I think it's important for you to point out to her that many states had something like what she's describing, same-sex unions. We had that in California for a number of years, right? But the key thing is that was never good enough for the real activists. And you have to ask yourself, why was that not good enough for the real activists? Because it was not for them. It really wasn't about health care and insurance benefits and things like that. That's not what it was really all about. It was about other things. And for the true activists, the true believers in the revolution, what they are really after is the deconstruction of marriage. That's really what they want. And you know, Lydia, the way you can see that is how few people have actually gotten married since we've introduced same-sex unions or same-sex marriages, right? I mean, that it's been legal since 2015. There's been no big rush of same-sex couples to get married. Instead, what the activists did is immediately turn to transgenderism. That's what they did. And so that shows you that what the activists really want was the deconstruction of marriage and also the deconstruction of gender itself, and taking away the one man, one woman requirement for marriage was a way of saying gender is unimportant, and we're going to get rid of gender, and that's part of what they were trying to accomplish. So that's an important aspect of it, that you can point out to your young people. The other thing is that in this book, I don't talk about gay marriage a huge amount in this book, Lydia, but the way I talk about it is that after I've explained these three ideologies here in the sexual state and how it really requires the government to make the divorce ideology work and to make the gender ideology work. It really requires intervention by the state to do that. Only then do I talk about how the whole move to have gay marriage, how that fits into the whole thing. And to basically say, people have already given up on marriage as a lifelong union that is potentially fruitful, right? And that's about the rearing and cultivation of children. We already gave that up a long time ago. So why shouldn't we let two guys get married? You know, that's kind of been the logic of the thing. But the point is, we were wrong to do that. We were wrong to give up the vision of marriage as a lifelong union oriented towards children. You know, those things have already been a mistake. And to further institutionalize it the way gay marriage does, that can't lead to anything good. So that's the way I would argue it. And I have a number of things about that in the book.
Okay, Lydia?
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Let's go to, I don't know if it's Wiley or Willie. It's the way it's written is Wiley in Porter, Texas, listening to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Is it Wiley or Willie?
Wiley.
Okay, Wiley, your question for Dr. Morse.
I'm going to try really hard not to get angry because this whole subject, I've been doing a lot of homework on it for years now, for 8 years, ever since my daughter was born. I do not want her growing up not being able to tell somebody, hi, I'm a girl, without being ridiculed and called a bigot. I have seen these transgender people, and I'm not going to try to not say names, but literally threaten members of different religious faiths, members of humanity, who flat out tell them, I'm sorry, God made you male and female. That's it. No matter what's in your head, no matter how you want to act, no matter how you want to dress, you are male and female. And my question is, and I'm trying to keep my calm, I'm telling you, I am so filled with just energy whenever I get into this subject. My question is, when are we really going to stand up? I've already told schools, I've told principals, if you try to teach this stuff to my kid, I will come down there.
All right, well, let's let Dr. Morse address that. I'm sorry that we're very short on time, so Wiley, we might not be able to have much back and forth.
Yes. You know what? Wiley, you should be mad. I think this is entirely appropriate for a father to be angry about this kind of stuff going on. We have at the Ruth Institute something we call the book clubs, and what we're trying to do is to create a way for people to get together and be organized. See, people on our side are not organized. The bad guys are very well organized, and we're not. So, and I'm not very good at organizing people, but at least we're trying, okay? And so I would suggest that you go to our website and look at the book clubs and start getting together a group of people who meet regularly, who study the issues, and who are ready with facts and reasons and evidence to go in and pitch battle when it has to happen. And there are parents doing this across the country. I'm in touch with a number of them across the country, especially at the local level on these sexual education, transgender issues. People are starting to fight back, and I really, really encourage you to do that, Wiley. And since we're all Catholic and we're all worried about this whole sex scandal thing, I would suggest strongly people form rosary groups. Form a group to get together once a week, say the rosary at your house, and then start studying some books and get yourself organized and ready so that when the issues come up, when they come to your school and they say, we're going to have this program for preventing bullying or whatever they've made up, that you're ready to do something about it. Because, one guy by himself is not going to be as strong as a group of you, especially if you're used to getting together and you're used to setting aside the time to do it. That's what we've got to do. We have got to get out of our comfort zones and get off of the sofa and out into the public square. So I applaud you, Wiley.
And when I just want to be, Wiley, I'll come right back to you, but the ruthinstitute.org is the website you're referring to, ruthinstitute.org.
That's right.
Right. Wiley, got just a couple seconds. Any response to Dr. Morse?
Thank you so much for just visiting this topic today. I'm glad I listened to your all show. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I am Catholic, and I want to let you all know that in my heart of hearts, I see a lot of these signs as being what they always preach to us as what's going to be it's the long end game. So you were talking a little earlier about end game. It's the long end game. The more that we are confused about our gender, the more we're confused about if it's okay to kill a baby if it's in a womb, the more we're confused about what's good or bad, the more he's winning.
Wiley, thanks so much for the call. Form that group. Dr. Morse is right. I want to let the listener know the book, again, is called The Sexual State, How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Church Was Right All Along. Dr. Jennifer Robach Morse is the author. Dr. Morse, thanks for a really fine hour.
You're very welcome.
You can find out more about Dr. Morse at thesexualstate.com or ruthinstitute.org. Stay here. We're going to talk about what's going on at the parish level around the world with Mark Brumley right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is apologist Tim Staples, and I'm here to tell you about the most exciting and innovative Catholic book in years. In today's world, people from countless perspectives pose challenges to our Catholic faith every day, in conversations, through the mass media, on the internet, and more on the infinite collection of social media platforms. There's no getting away from this daily onslaught. We as Catholics need to stand strong to be prepared to mount a daily defense, to respond to the many challenges that we as believers are presented with every day. To that end, my good friend and apologist extraordinaire Jimmy Akin has come up with what will surely be a go-to resource for years to come, a daily defense. A daily defense takes up a different challenge for every day of the year, 366 in all, teaching you how you can defend the faith and give answers to Catholics and skeptics alike. And it's user-friendly, with challenges and answers indexed alphabetically by scripture verses or by topic, so finding the answers can be quick and easy. Order your copy of A Daily Defense today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and you've probably heard me explain Catholicism to non-Catholic callers on the radio or engage opponents in formal public debates. I've always hoped these interactions would show people how to graciously defend and share our faith. But they're not enough. That's why I've created a weekly podcast that will help Catholics answer the toughest objections against our faith. Every episode of the Council of Trent will provide listeners with a conversation roadmap that will help them share their faith with anyone. Keep in mind that I hate boring lectures. These podcasts will contain entertaining, informative, and practical explanations of the faith, as well as interviews with the best Catholic writers and speakers in the world today. Visit TrentHornPodcast.com today to find out how you can subscribe to my new podcast. That's TrentHornPodcast.com.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children, or how to help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Lila Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to confront tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Dr. Peter Krapes says, Answering Atheism gets high grades on the 3 R's. It's readable, reasonable, and researched. Its defense of the cosmological argument has depth and detail, yet it's not so technical that you need to take a philosophy course to comprehend it. Order your copy of Answering Atheism today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the online shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and unfortunately inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back for our second hour of the Great Big Monday show here on Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and we'll ask you for just a quick second to reflect on what's going on in your parish. Parish around the world is where about maybe 97.3%, I'm actually making up that percentage, but something like that, of people, their primary...
I think it's 98.2.
Oh, that's your guess, Mark? It is Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press. And the reason we're speculating on how significant the parish is for most people. So somewhere between 97.3 and 98.2% of people, their primary interaction with the Catholic Church on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis is at the local parish. And I am of the mind we don't talk about that enough because, as a matter of fact, my suggestion a few years ago, I will inform you, Mark Brumley, was we needed an encyclical on the parish. But no, the popes have stopped listening to me when I tell them what to write encyclicals on. But we have the next best thing, Francis Cardinal Arinze, who was a baby bishop at the time at the very closing of the Second Vatican Council, and has been a great proponent of what Pope John Paul II called the new evangelization, and a great exemplary man in that regard. He's written a book called The Evangelizing Parish, and Mark Brumley is here with us because it is published by Ignatius Press. Mark Brumley, thank you for being with us to talk about this book.
Well, thank you. And that statement is correct as far as it goes, but it doesn't go all the way.
Okay.
You should let your listeners know, because Mark Brumley is here to talk about the book because it's published by Ignatius Press and because Cardinal Arinze is not.
Cardinal Arinze is not here, is what you're saying.
If he were...
Yeah. If you were, we'd let him talk.
He'd be on the show. You know, you'd rather have Cardinal Arinze on talking about his book than me, but...
I have never met Cardinal Arinze, so just for that reason, I would love it if he was on the show. But that would be a great privilege.
He is a great churchman. He is one of the great churchmen of the 20th century, and obviously the first part of the 21st century. He is a holy man. He is a wise man. This book is an example of his wisdom. He does a great job of just distilling the essence of the Second Vatican Council and John Paul II's call for the new evangelization, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis, all on evangelization right here in a single work that talks about the parish. It's just amazing.
But isn't it fascinating how often I think we almost in our minds bypass the parish when we think about the new evangelization? It's like, here's the greatest institution in the world, the Catholic parish. I mean, there's one almost everywhere, and the Eucharist is celebrated there every week. There is no more important institution than it, and it's almost an afterthought.
Yes, well, you raise a good point, and I think for those of us who work in apostolates, like Catholic Answers or Ignatius Press or the Augustine Institute or whatever, these various apostolates, there is a temptation to think that the locus of God's activity when it comes to things like evangelization is in our apostolates rather than in the local church, which is the diocese, and the diocese is a community or a family of parishes. That's really where evangelization should be happening. Now, if it isn't happening there, there's a problem because the parish has disconnected itself from the mission of the local church. If it's not happening in the local church at the diocesan level, there's a problem because then the diocese has disconnected itself in important ways from the universal church. But I do think there is a temptation. You know, as you know, I'm a big Catholic Answers groupie. We used to work there, and I still love Catholic Answers. So when people say evangelization, what pops into my head? Well, you know, Catholic Answers pops into my head as a major place evangelization occurs. Now, and that happens more than it should, not because Catholic Answers isn't great, but because I should be thinking of it in terms of my parish.
But the thing is, though, most of the people who write books about the parish or talk about the parish is how do we revitalize this parish? How do we, you know, how do you bring a parish fully alive? But Cardinal Arinze starts with turning outward from the parish, going out,
right.
and say something about that, the importance of that, as opposed to just the idea that, well, we need to invite more people into this social club that we call, you know, St. Francis Parish or whatever the parish is.
Yes, well, St. Miscellaneous Parish, right?
Okay, St. Miscellaneous.
That's right. You know, of course, again, heaping praise on Cardinal Arinze here, I say he understands what the teaching of the church is regarding the missionary nature of the church. That we are, you know, to use the language of John Paul II, we are called to communion. That means union with God, but to be united with God and to be united with one another in God. We are called to communion, and then we're sent on mission. So there's no genuine communion unless there's a missionary spirit. There's no genuine, or I would say the church life that we live is lacking a fundamental dimension if there is not a missionary spirit. Why? Well, because, you know, even taking it back into the Trinity, we have within the Trinity the Father, you know, generating the Son. That's a kind of mission. The Son receiving his life from the Father and giving himself back to the Father. That's a kind of mission. And then, of course, who proceeds from Father and Son? Holy Spirit. And then when God creates the world, what does he do? He gives himself in creation by creating something outside of himself. That's a mission, as it were. And then he enters into relationship with the world that he's made by creating man in his image and likeness, so that there is a kind of inherent missionary element. Of course, after the fall, the missionary nature of God's activity in the world is to call men back, to call people back to communion with God. So if we don't see this in our parish, if we think that the activity of the parish is primarily self-centered, I don't mean that just in the usual stereotypical negative sense of something being self-centered. I mean, if we think that it's just all about us and having a good time in our church and our wonderful worship experiences, then we're not connecting with God at a very deep level, because God sends us on mission.
888-318-7884 is our number. 888-318-7884. And all this that we do, whether it's a radio program that we have or we're a publishing house or whatnot, if it does not draw people to the Eucharist and to the parish, it's pretty close to futile. The point of this Catholic thing is that we gather together around the Eucharist, and then we are sent forth from that parish as missionaries. So Cardinal Arinze, the evangelizing parish is his way of kind of it's his contribution to the new evangelization. But I'm okay. So what's my role at the parish? I just go there for Mass on Sunday. What am I supposed to do, Mark?
Well, what you do at your parish is you believe, and by receiving God's word, listening to the word of God, then you participate in hope by relying on the means that God has given you to do his will, which is the sacraments. So you participate in divine worship. You worship God. And so you listen to God, you worship God, and then the third thing you do in your parish is you obey God by following the the moral law that God has given us and the pastoral directives of the church, especially with respect to serving those who are in need. So that's what you do in the parish. And if you do that right, if you listen to what God says and you love God and worship and you obey God in the way you live your life, you cannot help but want to share this life with other people. You cannot help but want to, because God wants to. If you love God, you're going to want to do the things that God wants you to do. And God wants you to love everybody. And the greatest gift of love is to help people come into right relationship with God through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. And at the heart of that is participation in the life of His church, especially in the life of the Eucharist. So that's what you do in your parish. You participate in the parish life of worshiping, believing God, trusting in God, obeying God, and then that means you're going to organize with others to go out and live your faith in the world and to bring other people into that relationship with God through Christ.
Mark Brumley,
there you go,
is the president of Ignatius Press, and the brand new book from Ignatius Press is The Evangelizing Parish from Francis Cardinal Arinze, or I never know. Do I say Francis Cardinal Arinze or do I say Cardinal Francis Arinze? Help me out.
Depends on how formal you want to sound. If you want to sound really formal, then you say Francis Cardinal Arinze.
I tend toward the informal.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'll bet you do.
So, well, I mean, I live in Southern California, Mark. It's not fancy like you are up there in San Francisco. It's not fancy down here. Okay, so if you have questions about the parish, if you'd like to talk with Mark about the Evangelizing Parish, 888-318-7884. It's maybe very timely, given that we're all wondering what can we do in the service of the church at the moment. Well, maybe not everyone's wondering that. Some are wondering
what am I doing here?
Where are the exits? But we hope that people aren't thinking that. But so this is a moment where we are, in fact, being forced to consider the church, the role the church plays in our lives, the role we play in the life of the church. If you'd like to talk about the Evangelizing Parish, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Before we go to a break, I will remind you we have a great big giant conference coming up. It really is a big giant conference. We've never had as great a interest as we've had in this Faith and Science conference that's coming up September 27th through 30th right here in beautiful, sunny San Diego. And Mark, I want you to come.
I appreciate your inviting me, even though I'm not a giant.
No, you're an intellectual giant. You're not a physical giant.
Okay.
We're not inviting physical
giants. This was a conference for giants. You said it was a giant conference.
No.
And I'm not really that tall. I mean, 5'9.5", 5'10" on a good day, but.
Really, on a good day, you're a half-inch taller. I've never met somebody who grows a half inch on a good day. I'm glad to hear that, Mark. But I want you to come to the conference. We'll give you a free ticket if you want. There's going to be so many good people there. Talk about giants. Father Terrence Ehrman's going to be there. Cardinal Burke's going to be there. Jimmy Akin's going to be there. Stacy Trasankos.
Jimmy's a giant.
Jimmy's a giant. Jimmy's an intellectual giant, and he has a giant red beard. Right. All right. Well, you go to CatholicAnswersConference.com to find out more about it. CatholicAnswersConference.com.
This is Cardinal Francis Arinze speaking to you through Catholic Answers Live. God bless you.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
We do our best to keep you well connected to all the events happening in our one holy Catholic and apostolic faith, from Rome to back home here in the U.S. and around the globe. It's also our goal to help each and every listener like you take this beautiful faith of ours out into the public square with great ideas on making a difference through engaging the culture.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Tomorrow morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press, is here with us this hour. We're talking about the brand new book from from Cardinal Francis Arinze. The book is called The Evangelizing Parish. After he talks a bit about the new evangelization and the parish's role in the new evangelization, he gets on to parish as community. Here's a tough one, Mark. Parish often doesn't function very much as a community. I mean, a little bit it does, but for many people, even when they go to Mass, they remain anonymous. I have a good friend, Deacon John, and he always says, if we don't know each other, we can't love each other. But we don't know each other.
Yeah, I think I've heard that criticism about parish life, and in fact, I've voiced it on occasion. The idea that parish is a community, or a communio, which is the fancy Latin word here.
Right.
There should be a communion or a oneness, a togetherness, and if there's not, there's something lacking in a parish. Now, when you say that, though, sometimes people will hear that and they will respond in what I think is a limited way, a way that's of limited value. They will say, "Well, we need to be more. We need more like community." So, when you're at Mass, we should have a moment where you turn to the guy next to you and you rub his shoulders.
Yeah.
Or you should all hold hands, or
come on, they don't say rub your shoulders. What kind of?
You would be. You're in Southern California, man. Weren't you around in the 80s and 90s in Southern California? I mean, come on.
I got out. I went to Boston. I went to Boston during those decades, and no one was rubbing anyone's shoulders at church.
There you go. Well, you get my point that they look to these kind of merely human ways of kind of fostering a sense of affection and closeness. I'm not saying they shouldn't be rubbing people's shoulders at Mass, but I'm not saying that those human instruments are not valuable and that they don't have a place. But we don't want to think that we come together as the church in our parishes mainly the way you come together in just an ordinary human society, because it's a divine and human society. So we come together because we have a common faith. We engage in common worship. We participate in a common way of life. So that's where our communion is. It's a communion in faith, hope, and charity. So we should be building community around that, our common faith, our common worship, our common way of life, our support for one another in need. And when we do that, if we're really attentive to the spiritual dynamism involved with that, we will see that we will start to get to know one another and feel comfortable, want to meet one another and learn people's names and all of that. But that really is kind of, I won't say a side effect, but it's something we should expect to flow from a common commitment of faith in our local parish. It shouldn't be what we think it's all about, because parishes can't replace all the other human communities that we're part of. They are supposed to be the way in which we live our faith together as Catholics.
Again, 888-318-7884. The number we're talking about, the evangelizing parish. There's a bunch of calls for you, Mark. Shall we move to calls?
Sure, let's go for it.
All right. Let's start with Anonymous. In an anonymous location, you are up first, Anonymous. Your question for Mark Brumley.
Okay, Mark, so just a little background. I help as catechist at a local parish near here.
Thank you for doing that.
They seem to just be maintenance. They don't even seem to challenge the parents for not going to Mass. They just seem to just kind of, well, this is the best we can do. This is the best we can do, and they kind of compartmentalize everything. For instance, to the parents that I was teaching their kids, I sent them out at how to vote as a Catholic, and I got reprimanded by the DRE and the pastor not to do that anymore. So I scratched my head like, well, what is this about? Are you trying to get people to heaven, or are you just trying to have a cushy job? So I'm wondering what your suggestion is on how to better get these people to understand that this is serious business. We're about saving souls, not just maintenance.
Mark?
Yeah, a number of people have criticized the kind of maintenance mode versus missionary mode. Maintenance mode just says we do the minimum things that we think is going to keep the parish on an even keel and going. We don't do anything missionary, radical, break out of our standard way of doing things to try to go out and reach people. The problem, well, there are lots of problems with the maintenance mode as opposed to a missionary mode. One of the problems is that you engage in the maintenance mode for very long and you find out that you're not able to maintain. The maintenance doesn't happen because the church is a dynamic reality. It's either growing or it's declining. And so if you're not out trying to evangelize and share the faith with people, if your objective is only, well, if they come to us, we will give them the Catholic faith, but we're not going to go out of our way to try to reach those people, then you shouldn't be surprised if your parish declines, or if people in the neighborhood wind up going to another church. They go down to Good Book Baptist, or the Word of Faith Missionary World Outreach Center, or whatever. And that's because those churches, although we would say from a Catholic perspective, they're deficient in a lot of ways, they nevertheless have a missionary spirit. They are Christian churches, and so people glom onto that. And so I think what to do about it? Well, first of all, you got to pray for your parish. You have to pray yourself to be as good a Catholic parishioner as you can be. Then you have to share with key people in your parish the missionary nature of the church. I think I would try to facilitate a discussion with them using Pope Paul VI's Evangelium Nunciani, his encyclical letter on evangelization, maybe some things from John Paul II on the new evangelization. People say, well, what do you think about Pope Francis's Evangelium Gaudium? And I say, well, I think it's a helpful thing, but it's not a place, people might get offended by this. I don't think it's a place to start. I think it's a much higher level conversation about the church's missionary work and some areas that we need to improve. I don't think it's the place to begin, so I'd begin with that. And I think I'd try to find a few people who are in the parish you can pray together with and talk together with and study together with about missionary activity. Eventually you're going to have to go to your pastor and bring it up with your pastor and say, look, can we do this? Even if he is not prepared yet to unleash you on parish activities at large, that doesn't mean he won't stand behind you doing something like St. Paul Street evangelization or some kind of evangelization efforts on your own. It may be that it will take something like that to get others who are in your parish doing things that ought to involve an element of evangelization to actually start doing that.
Anonymous, thanks. I'm going to keep moving because the lines are full, and I'm going to open some of these lines up by answering questions. Sarah in Houston, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Sarah, you are up with Mark Brumley. Your question, please. Sarah? No? Oh, well, I'm 75% sure that wasn't me. I'm doing all kinds of percentages. I don't know why. I don't usually do math, but
I would say 75.8. I'd say probably.
Sarah, call back. It could have been me. Sometimes I push the wrong button. Sean, listening on Catholic.com, you are up next. Your question for Mark Brumley, Sean.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hi.
And you as well.
Hi. My question is this. I am fearful that there's a cabal of both homosexuals, sodomites, and heretics within the ranks, from my bishop on down to the priests, and I'm wondering, what's the best way a layman can go about addressing this?
Oh, that's a big topic.
You can see how a question like that, though, would sap the evangelizing spirit. If you are of a sense, as Sean is, that in his local church there's nefarious things going on,
right.
That would kind of sap out the desire to evangelize and draw people in.
I'd make a distinction between a sense that that's happening and direct knowledge of it's happening.
Yeah.
Where you have direct knowledge that immoral sexual behavior is occurring at a diocesan level or a parish situation, that's something that does need to be brought to the attention of authorities, church authorities. So that's one thing. If it's just, I think it's going on, I have a sense it's going on, I suspect it's going on, that's a different matter. You should certainly pray about that situation. And where it's appropriate, talk to people about it. Because part of evangelization is calling people who are engaging in immoral activity to repentance. When Jesus came preaching the kingdom of heaven, he was the incarnation of the evangelist. He was the Word of God itself made manifest, in human flesh. The Word made flesh, we say. So what did he do? First off, he's coming to proclaim the kingdom. He's coming to be the lead evangelist. What does he say? He says, repent. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent and believe the good news. So part of evangelization is challenging people to repentance. Sometimes today we will talk about, a welcoming spirit, and that's really important. And helping people understand God's love and move away from this image of God is always angry at me and that kind of thing. That's important too. But sometimes, I say always at some level, but in different ways, we have to call people to repentance. That is to say, turning away from the way of life that they have or the way of thinking that they have and turning toward God, being turned by the Spirit toward God. And that has to do with our sexuality, how we live at home, what we do on the job, how we interact with our neighbors, the whole panoply of things. So from an evangelizing point of view, that's why I'd say you got to talk to people, try to share the love of Christ with them, try to help them see if they're doing something immoral, that this is not liberating.
An important distinction, however, between knowledge and a suspicion, because
Yes.
I suppose we're all being kind of pushed towards suspicion and
Yes.
looking askance at the church. But if you have that kind of knowledge, man, it's time to get it out. We better not hold those in anymore. Mark Brumley is our guest. We're talking about the evangelizing parish. Be back with more of your calls for Mark right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children, or how to help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Lila Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to confront tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about it on Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Cardinal Francis Arinze, a magnificent cardinal, worked for a long time. He's an African cardinal who worked for a long time at the at the Vatican, at the Holy See, with Pope Saint John Paul II. There's so many. The Great. I always get tongue-tied with. He used to just be Pope John Paul II.
Now he's
what?
Pope Saint John Paul II, right?
But then you got to throw in the Great too. It's a lot.
The Great.
It's a lot to cover. But this is you think about some of these wonderful bishops we've had, Cardinal Rinze among them, and who have just they've been tasked with trying to communicate to the church what truly the church has been teaching through the Second Vatican Council, the great outpouring of the Holy Spirit at the Second Vatican Council, trying to do that in a way that's faithful to Jesus and the whole history of the church. And now Cardinal Rinze comes out with this book, The Evangelizing Parish, which kind of puts his stamp on what he sees. And I do think his insight that the parish is the location where the church happens for most everybody is a really, really important insight. As much as it's important what we do at Catholic Answers, as you said, or at Ignatius Press, we're not confecting the Eucharist. We're not the place where Christ's people gather to be with him. And the parish is. So I want to, moving on a little bit, the parish teaching the faith is another chapter in the book. So, okay, how shall I put this? Again, we are faced with the fact that there seems to be a great division in the church, different visions about what should be taught in faith formation. So what does Cardinal Rinze have to say about it?
Well, he wants the Orthodox teaching of the church presented. We could make a couple of points here. The division isn't just Orthodox and heterodox, or liberal and conservative, or whatever terms you would. Orthodoxy, of course, just means you're teaching the faith as the church proclaims it. Okay, that's one issue. Is what the parish is presenting what the church teaches?
Yes.
And there are some places where the answer to that question is no, the parish isn't presenting that. The parish is presenting somebody else's ideas or theories or the latest, theologians' opinions, and not what the church teaches. Okay, but even where the church's teaching is presented in an orthodox way, the church is not, or the parish should not just be seen as a classroom where you go to get orthodox doctrine. There are catechetical moments, catechesis. By the way, we want to make a distinction between evangelization and catechesis. It's a distinction but not a separation. To evangelize can mean several things. One, to introduce people to the person of Christ and the good news about Jesus Christ. The first time, it's initial evangelization. Or it could be an ongoing kind of evangelization. I get evangelized every day when I go to Mass. I try to be attentive and listen to what God is speaking to me through the Word of God proclaimed and through the prayers of the Mass. And I hope that I'm being more and more gospelized. That's what it means to be evangelized. The word evangelization comes from euangelion, the gospel. So I become more and more transformed by the gospel. I become more and more evangelized. So there's initial evangelization and ongoing evangelization. But in order for me to become more and more gospelized and think like Jesus and live like Jesus and respond to things the way that Jesus wants me to respond and to know him more deeply, I have to be taught about him. I have to learn more about him. And that systematic learning about him we call catechesis. So we got evangelization on the one hand and we have catechesis on the other. So whether we're talking about children or young adults or adults, there should be in the parish systematic instruction in the Catholic faith. Even when that occurs, though, and we're going to call that catechesis, there should still be an evangelizing element. Now, why do I say that? Because oftentimes people have been, to use the jargon, sacramentalized but not evangelized. That is to say, they have gone through a course or a process to receive their sacraments. Baptized as an infant, confirmed as a young person, they've received First Holy Communion, done First Confession, all these kinds of things. And there's been some instruction that's occurred, they've been taught, but they haven't necessarily, I should say the faith has been taught, but it hasn't necessarily been caught. So what does that mean? The grace of faith, theological virtue of faith that is given to us in baptism, that's like a seed that you plant in the ground. And if you don't nourish it with the Word of God and the sacramental life of the church, that seed will not flourish. And so young people sometimes are sacramentalized. They receive the sacraments, but they haven't been evangelized. They haven't had the Word of God proclaimed to them. They haven't been introduced to Jesus in word and example in their family life or in the parish life. And so they go through this process of taking classes or doing their confirmation prep, and they don't undergo a deepening conversion. So parishes have to be places where there is initial conversion that occurs, where we're out preaching to people on the street that don't know anything about Jesus. They're not baptized. They don't know anything about this. And we're bringing God's love to them, initial conversion, but also people who have been sacramentalized in the life of the church, ongoing conversion. So they come to know Jesus sort of, I'm going to say, proportionate to whichever stage of life they're in. So a 3-year-old knows Jesus in a certain way. A 30-year-old knows the Lord in a different way. A 60-year-old should know the Lord in still another way. So this is an ongoing process of conversion.
Again, 888-31-TRUTH, the number. Let's go to John in Dallas, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. John, your question for Mark Brumley.
I appreciate the time, you guys, and I really appreciate what you were talking about with the sacramentalized versus evangelized. It wasn't until recently where I actually spent some time with some evangelical Protestants who challenged me to read the Bible, and I was like, I know the Bible. I've gone through everything, and what I realized when I actually started reading the Gospels is how little of it that we know. And the challenge, well, what I learned was, is what are we here to do? And it is just that. It's to bring Christ to people who have not met him yet. And I feel like in getting into the Bible and actually just reading it, I encountered that in a way that I hadn't through all of the sacramentalization, if that's a word, that I had received through my Catholic education and beyond. The challenge that I have is when I think about, okay, how do I bring people to Christ within my church? It's really difficult. When the rubber hits the road, with all of the rules that we have and with all of the stuff that we're going through today in the church, I guess I don't usually listen to Catholic radio, but I'm at the point where I can either leave or I can either start speaking up. And that's where I am now. How do we have a conversation about how do we make Christ more accessible? Because in the Gospels, Christ is real simple. He just is there for the acceptance. And when it comes to evangelizing today in the context of our churches and our parishes, it's really, really difficult with all the rules with the Eucharist and all the people who have been excluded through rules on marriages, who have hurt feelings, and I think rightfully so. How do we have a conversation about that in the church to actually make the rubber hit the road and bringing Christ to people who are seeking him?
Well, I mean, I think there's a distinction between having a conversation that you want to result in a change in activity in the church. That's a conversation, I think, that best starts with pastoral leadership. So the pastor of the church, priests, deacons, lay leadership, they need to be at the heart of a conversation about how do we make Christ known to either the people in our congregation or the people in the wider community. So that's one thing I would say. But another thing I would say is that we need to develop what I call middle spaces. What are middle spaces? Well, we know what it means to be a Catholic, be part of a Catholic parish or a Catholic family, or Catholic community life. We know what that is. We know what it means to not be involved with that, to be out somewhere else on your own, unchurched, and so on. What about the middle space, this transition space, somebody who is evangelized, but then is not fully participating in the life of the parish and life of the church? Now, somebody might say, well, that's what RCIA is for. Well, it is and it isn't. RCIA is the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults. And it is a process of initiating or bringing people into a relationship with Christ in the community of the Catholic Church, okay? But not everybody who is interested in Christ or interested in faith is ready to explore commitment or initiation into the life of the parish or the church yet. And really, RCIA, although there is a kind of journey and seeking and inquiry component to it, it's really for people that have sort of decided in a serious way they're exploring becoming Catholics. But there are plenty of other people who don't know the Catholic Church from the Baptist Church from no church, who are looking for faith, who are trying to find the purpose of life, who may even have some kind of commitment to Jesus or Christ. They're not ready to understand that commitment in Catholic terms. So there needs to be a place for them in our parishes where they come, say, on a Tuesday. I advocate having Testimony Tuesday, right? So in your parish, people come and share their story of faith. They talk, where you have people who are converts, they come and talk why they became Catholic. People who are cradle Catholic talk about their journey of faith, and you do it in a dynamic and engaging way. That, coupled with people who are out on the streets and out in the communities, meeting people and inviting them to come to Testimony Tuesday, where they can hear these things. And then after they've been going to Testimony Tuesday for a while, they might want to go to a Wednesday night prayer group or a Wednesday night Bible study. These things don't involve people necessarily committing at that point, there and then, to becoming Catholics. They become places where people can learn a little bit about what does it mean to be a Christian or a Catholic Christian, and then may be introduced to the life of the parish in such a way that they say, hey, I do want to come to RCIA. I do want to find out what it means to be a Catholic in a more serious and systematic way. So I think all those things are involved, John.
John, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that question. We got to go to a quick break, and I want to remind you that Catholic Answers Magazine, we have a special price for students because they're all heading back to school, whether it's high school or college or graduate school, or they're going to get challenged. They're going to come up against questions that they need the answers to, and we think that's what Catholic Answers Magazine does about as well as any magazine in the world on a 6 times a year basis. And we'd love to put it in their hands. You just go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com. You use the promo code MSchool. That's the letter M and then the word school in the promo code box, and you get the special top secret price for students to get a 1-year subscription. It's the lowest price in years. It's $24.95, but it's top secret. $24.95 for a 1-year subscription to your student to Catholic Answers Magazine. Go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com and put in the promo code MSchool.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I come from the other side of the tracks, see? My uncle used to have slot machines. Put one nickel in and it's emptied. And I brought him home in a bag, and my mother looked at me. Where did you get all that money? I said, I won them. You didn't win them. He fixed the machine. I didn't care if he fixed the machine or not, you know?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
The Evangelizing Parish is the new book from Cardinal Francis Arinze, one of the great cardinals of the recent history of the Church. I said he was a baby cardinal at the end of the Second Vatican Council. He was the youngest, baby bishop, not baby cardinal. He was the youngest bishop at the council, and he was only there for the last session, the fourth session. Is that correct, Mark? Do I have my recollections correct?
I knew that he was the youngest bishop. I did not know that he was only there for the 4th session, but it doesn't surprise me.
He was with Pope John Paul II. He was the prefect for the Congregation of Divine Worship and for the discipline of the sacraments. He's from Nigeria, and really just an inspiring guy. And this book, The Evangelizing Parish, is his call to us to, through our parish, truly be evangelizers. It's published by Ignatius Press. We are joined by Mark Brumley, president of Ignatius Press. Oh, you're holding up your copy?
Yeah, and you notice the cover, you got a church doorway.
Yeah, right.
And you see people facing out.
But then there's more people.
Yeah, reaching more people.
It's, so the parish is not looking inward. The parish is looking outward, which is the key.
The 2 directions the parish should be looking is east or up and out. The up is to the east. That is to say, oriented towards God, and because we're oriented towards God, and He wants us to bring others in, then we're facing out as well. So,
yep, that's right. Let's go to Danny in Missouri. You are up next with Mark Brumley. Your question, Danny.
Well, it's kind of like a question. I'm a retired Protestant minister. I'm retired because I turned my papers in, and the church and the school I went to no longer exist because of the truth. I'll be 62 this year, and I'm proud to say next Easter I will become a Catholic. I started RCIA last week.
Oh, praise God,
and
Danny.
my journey has been long, and of all places at 17, I ended up in Spain, which I didn't know was. That's the first time I met Catholics in a Catholic church.
Well, let me hang on, Danny. Let me ask you something. Okay, so lifelong Protestant, you meet Catholics. How did we do? Like, did we meet your expectations? Were we worshiping statues or anything, or did you have a good impression of Catholic people?
That's the thing. Is my whole life I've been taught all these lies about the Catholic Church, but from the age of 14 up, something bothered me about there's something wrong here. And my first night in Spain, I was in the Navy. I went out to eat, and there were some nuns and a priest sitting at a table. The priest had a cigarette and a glass of wine.
Yeah, I guess that would make an impression. Well, it just so happens we're okay with cigarettes and glasses of wine. Danny, your question.
Maybe more with the glasses of wine than cigarettes.
Yeah, not so much cigarettes anymore, but this was a while ago. You have a question for Mark, though?
The question is on the evangelizing. As a Protestant minister, if someone didn't show up in church, we called them or went to their house.
Yep.
But in my years of meeting Catholics and studying the Catholic faith and finding the truth, it's sad that so many Catholics don't really know what their faith is. So they're not able to invite people out. And we should have the church, the biggest building in the church should be a church room that people's coming in and joining RCIA and becoming Catholic, because even they don't know the truth. These people are searching the world. But as a parishioner, it should be our job also, along with the priests and the diocese, invite people, invite our friends that's not Catholic in. Take them, like you said earlier, to a Bible study. Let them see what they're... And when they see the Eucharist, they will feel that Christ is there. And they can start learning what the real truth is. That Christ on the statue is not sacrificing them. It's Him showing what He did for each other. And it's just as much, I feel, the parishioner's fault for not helping the church grow as anyone else, because they don't even know how to explain why we pray to Mary.
Well, I'll tell you what, two things on that. One, they need to get this book, The Evangelizing Parish. And two, Mark, your response to Danny.
I want to know, Danny, I just want to say, preach it, Pastor. Where do you live, Danny?
I live on top of a mountain in McCord Bend, Missouri, southwest Missouri. My spouse came down with cancer a year ago. She was being a nun, and she left the convent.
I see.
Next month will be 20 years that we've been together, and she had.
It sounds like she brought you in, though.
No, I brought her in. She hadn't been to a Catholic church in 40 years.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's really great story. I ask where you're from just because I know that sometimes pastors, especially in the South and all of that who come into the Catholic Church, they have a similar experience. They're wondering, you got the fullness of the faith. How come you don't have the missionaries out converting people? And I'm happy that you're coming into full communion in the Catholic Church, Danny. And I think you're going to be a helpful missionary You're going to be missionary to Catholics to help them become more effective missionaries.
What a delightful call, Danny. I hope you'll call again sometime. It was great talking with you. I'd love to hear from you again as you journey towards Easter and the reception of the Eucharist.
Amen.
Let's try to get as many of these calls as we can get to, though. Anonymous in Cleveland, Ohio, listening on 1260 AM. Anonymous, your question for Mark Brumley.
Yes, my wife and I are raising our family kind of according to the standards of the great St. John Vianney. And he very openly condemned alcohol, condemned dancing, and condemned most especially immodesty and impurity, especially with girls. So many Catholic parish functions allow gambling, allow alcohol, and impurity, especially like during the summertime with water activities or volleyball. There's no way I could possibly take my family to these functions. So, but do I openly speak against this, or how should I approach that?
Mark?
Well, I'm just going to say, people have different sensibilities here. There are moral norms. Certain things are wrong and certain things are right. But among the things that are right, you're going to have people have differences of opinion about things like having a dance at the parish hall or whether alcohol should be served in the parish. I live in the Napa Valley. My parish at St. Apollinaris, by the way, which has a great evangelization committee. Just had to get that plug in. We are an evangelizing parish. We have wine living in the Napa Valley, and I don't see that it's abused in our parish functions. So I understand St. John Vianney was in a certain context, and so he obviously had to call people that were living worldly lives to a higher standard. But we don't want to make the mistake of assuming that just because people like to have beer at a church function, or they like to play bingo, or they like to have water sports, that they're necessarily immoral. That's the first point. Second point, I do think, though, there is a place for evangelizing parishes and parishioners so that they think about how they dress and how they act with respect to modesty, especially young men and young women nowadays. But I think that is best handled by helping to convert the minds and hearts of young people so that they discern inside that there's a problem. Obviously, certain things you're going to say, if you're a parent, you say, I don't care whether you agree with me or not, you're not going to wear that or you're not going to do that. But within a range, a reasonable range, we want young people to have their consciences formed in such a way that they come to make appropriate judgments about how they dress or how they act. So that's a whole other question we could spend a whole hour on, which we don't have time for, but that's what I'd say.
All right, I want to get to another call. Anonymous in Cleveland, thank you so much for that call. Rick in Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. You are up next, Rick. Your question for Mark Brumley.
My question is similar to the previous, but a slightly different focus. Who is this book really aimed at? Is it really aimed at a bishop for making his parishes evangelizing parishes? Is it for a parish pastor? Is it for a parish board member or commission lay minister or a layman? Who gets the most benefit out of this book?
I think it's a book for everybody, every Catholic. Obviously, there's directions for pastors here, and since pastors are key figures in the parish, obviously a lot of what's said here is directed to them. But it also talks about other, as he says, major parish actors, that is, say, people who have roles to play in the parish, including associate pastors, any religious that are in the parish, laity, and so on. So it's really a book for all of those folks. And it's also a book for the average person who may not even have, a leadership role in the parish, because we average people are members of the parish. we're called to evangelize, that doesn't just mean being on a evangelization committee or on a team. It also means learning how to evangelize in our daily lives, in the ordinary living out of our lay vocation, on the job, in the community, in our politics, in our family situation, our relationships with other members of our family, our extended family. All of those are places where evangelization can and should occur, and those are primarily lay, part of the lay vocation, living out the life of the laity. So it's really for everybody.
Rick, thanks for the call. You did it, Mark. You got to every caller today. Thanks. Mark Brumley, our guest from Ignatius Press. Thanks so much for a very fine hour, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you guys. God bless you.
And the book is The Evangelizing Parish, Cardinal Francis Arinze. We've got a lot of work to do as Catholics, but that's a gift and an opportunity that we've got a lot of work to do. You can get the book from Ignatius Press. Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. If you've got a question about the life, the faith, the history of the Catholic Church, or Mark Brumley's dog barking in the background, just give us a call, 888-318-7884. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.